What's going on, everyone? So I want to give you guys a quick update. We're going to take a look and a listen to Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, so AOC. She's going to be talking a little bit about the $3.5 trillion bill, as well as the vote today, so the vote on that first infrastructure bill. I'm also going to give you guys a summary of where we are so far. So we're going to talk about the funding for the government. We're going to talk about the debt ceiling. We're also going to talk about the two infrastructure bills. So that's what we're going to discuss today. But first off, on this channel, we talk about news that matters. If that sounds like something interesting to you, please subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell notification. That way you'll get notified anytime we put out a video. And like always, if you see a picture of me and my name in the comment section, make sure you also see a check mark next to my name. That check mark signifies that it's me. If you do not see that check mark, it's not me. It's someone trying to impersonate me. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is funding the government. So Majority Leader Schumer announced late yesterday, that they have a deal when it comes to funding the government. So it looks like they'll be able to fund the government until December 3rd. So they will have that vote sometime later today. So stay tuned for that. The Senate will be voting on funding the government, just funding the government, not the debt ceiling. They'll vote for funding the government, then it'll go to the House, they'll pass it, and then we'll have funding for until December 3rd. Okay, now when it comes to the debt ceiling, the House passed a bill yesterday that extended the debt ceiling until December of 2022. So that needs to go through the Senate now. Past the House, it's going to go to the Senate, but it looks like it's going to die in the Senate. So this whole debt ceiling debate, this is going to be something that we're going to be watching for a while. And it's already been indicated that around October 18th, if nothing is done, we're looking at a situation where we're going to default, and that's not going to be good for our credit rating across the world. So we're going to have to follow this. This is going to be something else among other things that we're looking at. We're still looking at COLA. COLA's we haven't been talking a lot about that, but when it comes to Social Security, COLA's also out there. That will be happening sometime in October. We'll find out what COLA will be for 2022. And this is just going to be something else in addition to that. So the debt ceiling is going to be an argument. We still don't know what's going on with the two infrastructure bills. So you have the first infrastructure bill. They should be voting on that today. However, it looks like they don't have the votes, and we're going to listen to AOC. She's going to explain where they are when it comes to that. And then we have the $3.5 trillion bill, which it looks like that, I mean, we still don't even have anything in writing when it comes to that $3.5 trillion bill. So we're going to be watching and waiting for that. But it looks like the first infrastructure bill, second infrastructure bill, I don't know if we're going to even have a vote today on that first infrastructure bill, just because there's just so much stuff that's going on. But I want you to hear it from AOC, so she's going to talk a little bit about that. So let's go ahead and play that clip right now. Here we go.
This now is New York Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, a member of the Progressive Caucus. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thanks for your time.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Wanted to ask you, obviously we're getting to crunch time. There is some reporting tonight that the Senate may have agreed amongst themselves that they will avert a government shutdown tomorrow night. So that may take some of that immediate pressure on, but we're still obviously looking at this string of hurdles in terms of passing the president's big $3.5 trillion plan. Is there a different conversation happening inside the Progressive Caucus than is happening inside the Democratic Party caucus as a whole? I know the whole Democratic caucus meets now, and the Progressive Caucus meets amongst themselves. Are those conversations materially different?
Okay, and I just want to clarify this, just so you guys kind of understand what's going on when it comes to the different factions of the Democratic Party. So you have your moderate Democrats, you have your progressive Democrats, and you have some Democrats that fall somewhere in between. And so the progressives at this point, they're saying that they want that $3.5 trillion bill with the first infrastructure bill. So the first infrastructure bill, second infrastructure bill, they want to vote on those simultaneously at the same time. And what the moderates are saying, the moderates in the Democratic Party are saying, no, you know what? We already have the first infrastructure bill. It's passed the Senate. Let's go ahead and pass that in the House, and then we will take up the $3.5 trillion bill. So the only problem that the progressives have is they don't trust the moderates. So they don't trust the fact that if we move forward with that first infrastructure bill, they think that the moderates will forget about that second infrastructure bill, or they'll take a lot out of that second infrastructure bill because they already got what they wanted in that first infrastructure bill. And so that's the big argument right now. So you have these different factions in the Democratic Party that are fighting against each other. And when it comes to the Republicans, at this point, the Republicans, they're on the sidelines. They're not doing much, okay? They're not voting for the second infrastructure bill. They did that bipartisan bill. You had some Republicans come along with that. However, when it comes to the second infrastructure bill, they're MIA. They're not going to vote on it, for it, or anything like that. So that's where we are. Just wanted to kind of clear that up just so you kind of understand progressives, moderates, what's going on in the Democratic Party. Here we go.
You know, I think the conversations that happen within the Progressive Caucus are very focused in how do we expand childcare, healthcare, climate action, and restore power to working class people in the United States of America. That is what we talk about every day, all the time, from week to week. And you know, there may be some differences between the Progressive Caucus and the overall caucus in some of those centers of conversation, but I would say that we have been laser focused on this agenda and delivering for working class families across the country all year. And that does not change. It's really just a discussion of how do we best do that in a way that most people can feel in their everyday lives.
For people who don't follow congressional process very closely, a lot of people who I know, who I respect their sort of news judgment on these things, they say all of our intensive coverage of this process and the will they or won't they discussion is alienating to a lot of people. None of the process makes much sense. The filibuster itself is a mystifying thing. Can you explain for folks who maybe haven't been covering this or following this super closely, why there is an insistence that this smaller bill tomorrow, this bipartisan roads and bridges bill, shouldn't pass on its own tomorrow right away and then move on to the larger bill later? Why is there an effort to link them both and make sure that the big bill doesn't get delayed indefinitely after the small bill passes?
Yeah, so I completely agree with you that a lot of this discussion about process and tit for tat just is very difficult to follow and doesn't really cover the heart of this conversation, which is that we have two bills at present, one which underfunds most priorities across the board. So there are very few priorities that even get the full funding that they even need. And then there is the larger, what is known as the budget bill, reconciliation bill. That has the stuff that you're going to feel in your everyday life. Universal pre-K. We're talking about college, community colleges. We're talking about expansion of Medicare, and we're debating including vision and dental in Medicare, conversations about lowering the age of it, robust climate action, renewable energy. All of that stuff that you're going to feel in your everyday life is in what is known as the Build Back Better Act, aka the Reconciliation Bill. Now, when we were discussing the scope of this bill way earlier in the year, this was the original infrastructure bill. And we have a vast majority of Democrats, about 96%, that are in agreement of the entire agenda. Now, a very small handful of Democrats, about 4% of the party, are trying to essentially split these two priorities up. And I personally don't think it's an accident that the ones that a lot of lobbyists love are in the much smaller, underfunded bill that don't make prescription drugs easier to buy and more affordable, etc. And what they want to do is split them apart, force a vote on the first one, and because we have such narrow margins in the Senate and the House, you know, the read that we have is that they'll just dump the second one, leave the other one out to dry, and just never actually vote on it. And so the way that we bring our two parts of the caucus together is by saying, you know what? My bill is bound up in your bill, and your bill is bound up in my bill. So do I love this very, you know, what I would argue a conservative underfunded bill? No. But I will vote for it if we pursue them both together. But what we should not take is this approach, which is what people are trying to do by forcing a vote tomorrow on an under-considered, under-amended bill by itself, by saying, we want to force this vote right now, and it's either my way or the highway. You don't work together. I want your vote, but I will give you nothing for it. Your community will not benefit from this as much as mine will. We don't have to pursue that route. We can, instead of saying it's either mine or yours, we can say both of us can succeed together. And that is the case that the Progressive Caucus is making. But if we vote for this bill tomorrow, Rachel, and I want to be very clear about this, if we vote for this underfunded, too small infrastructure bill alone, instead of voting for it with the rest of the president's agenda, if we vote for it alone, it could make our climate crisis worse, and it risks being the only or the last substantive piece of legislation that we will pass. I do not believe, we do not have the assurances necessary to believe in good faith that reconciliation will pass if infrastructure passes tomorrow.
Okay, and I cut her off, but we'll get right back to it. So she's saying it right there. Look, if we're not going to vote for the first infrastructure bill and the second infrastructure bill, we're not voting for that first infrastructure bill tomorrow or today. Basically, this was posted yesterday. So that's what she's saying there. She's saying there's a no vote on the first infrastructure bill if we don't have that second infrastructure bill with it. So there you go.
Because it gives that small, narrow margin of Democrats that have, you know, really been making this process quite difficult. You know, there was an overall agreement between the process 2 months ago, and then there was a reneging of that. And so if we can just stick to our original plan, stick to the promises we've made each other, we can proceed in good faith and transform the lives of millions of Americans for the better.
Do you feel optimistic that it'll happen?
I do feel optimistic because the Progressive Caucus, and not just the Progressive Caucus, but we are now seeing a lot more Democrats, even not part of the Progressive Caucus, join and say, you know what? Childcare, healthcare, the climate crisis, this is too important to shelve. It's too important to shelve. And I also want to really thank people at home for supporting House Democrats who do not accept corporate PAC and lobbyist money. And those sorts of Democrats are not just progressive, they're not just conservative, they really transcend a lot of party ideology, but they're a recent phenomenon and that have really been surging since 2016 and 2018. And I really do believe that that is what is changing the dynamic that we're seeing in Washington today, where that stranglehold that lobbyists have traditionally had over Washington, that still very much do in a lot of sectors, is starting to loosen, because everyday American voters and everyday people at home are starting to support members of Congress and send members to Congress that don't just do what lobbyists tell them to do, but say we're going to make tough decisions. This is a moment of heartburn, but I want to be clear that not voting for this tomorrow is not a permanent decision. We can always reconsider it when the time is right and when these tensions have been assuaged. And I do believe that they will be assuaged.
Okay, so that was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talking about this where we are when it comes to the first infrastructure bill, second infrastructure bill. And there was something that was key that she pointed out. And if you followed back early, let's say January, let's say after the stimulus package, that last stimulus package was signed, so back in March, if you followed when they started talking about the infrastructure bill, that infrastructure bill was a large bill and it encompassed a lot. And what they did is they broke that up. So they said, okay, we're going to focus just on the roads, bridges, and broadband, and then we'll have that second infrastructure bill, the human infrastructure bill, come right along with it. So that was the plan, to break it up. But initially, it was all together. And so, and I was saying this back then, I say this today, they should have had just one bill that was a reconciliation bill. Because what they did is they created this bipartisan bill, this first infrastructure bill. And so now you have these two separate bills. And if they had it just one infrastructure bill, it's just going to go through reconciliation. They didn't have to worry about all this stuff. Sure, you're going to have Senator Manchin, Senator Sinema, they're going to have some opposition, but they could work with them and figure out what to put in the infrastructure bill as a whole, like one big infrastructure bill. But now that you've broken it up, now you have one that's halfway done, and then you have another one that's just beginning, and it's just chaotic right now. So we're going to continue to follow this. We'll see what happens on the vote today. Just wanted to get this video out so you guys kind of know, just set the scene for today. It will be pretty busy because we're looking at a few different bills that will be going through. So we'll have to see if it passes the House. We'll have to see if this first infrastructure bill passes the House. We'll have to see if Speaker Pelosi brings it to the House floor, because she might not bring it up for a vote. If she doesn't have the votes, she's not going to bring it up, and she's already indicated that. But she did give today as a deadline, so we'll see where they go with that. If you guys have any questions, post them down below.